Hi. Very excited to be in Berlin. It's my first time here. Yeah. As Martin said, I'm going to be talking about building communities. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my background, which Martin has covered a little bit. Then I'm going to talk about what communities are, some aspects of them. I'll share some examples, and then I'll talk a little bit about my role in UK government. So, as Martin said, I'm the community manager for user-centered design at GDS. As Martin said, before joining GDS, I was doing my master's degree at Hyper Island. And I was doing it in digital experience design, which is the same thing as service design. It's just another word for it. And as Martin said, I wrote my thesis about communities, and I was mainly looking at kind of like emerging online communities. So that's an aspect that I'm really interested in. And I was also kind of looking at communities of doing. So rather than communities that are just kind of like exploring and kind of doing design thinking, I was looking at communities that were design doing. Before that, I worked at an innovation consultancy called C-Space. And their kind of main thing that they do is online communities. So they have private online communities for brands like Samsung and O2, and they've used them to do market research and co-creation. So I feel like I got this really weird, like niche experience of working in online communities, but it's actually becoming kind of more of a thing that brands and consultancies are interested in doing, because it's a way to kind of tap into your customers really quickly and understand who they are. And before that, I went to design school, so I went to Parsons and I studied design and management, so I have a really mixed background of business, design, and communities. So for me, communities started with my love of dance. So when I was young, I was very shy, and dance was like a way for me to express myself. It was a way for me to be creative. And I've moved a lot over my life. I'm American, grew up in the UK, moved to Paris, moved to New York. And dance was always a way for me to find community in each of the cities that I moved to. So for me, design, like dance, can kind of inspire confidence, and it can build communities. And when I think about kind of my background and the things that I've done and the projects that I've worked on, the things that tie them all together are kind of participatory design, open innovation, education, and communities. So something that I'm really interested in is how we can kind of work better together, how we can use participatory design to create more resilient communities and to inspire confidence. Things are better when we share and collaborate. So, talking about communities. Communities are a source of knowledge. A community is a group of individuals, like this one, that come together voluntarily. But there's lots of different types of communities. There's communities of interests, so dance is a community of interest. There's communities of practice, like this one, coming together about the practice of service design. There's innovation communities, so kind of getting people together with diverse skills to kind of work on innovative solutions to challenges, and those can be online. As I said, a lot of the research that I've done is with online communities, so I'll be alluding to some of that as I go through the presentation. So communities are not only a source of knowledge, their communities are bound by shared goals, so people in a community have similar interests, similar purpose, and similar motivations for being part of a community. And communities can be online or face-to-face, and sometimes they can be a bit of both. Most of the times they're a bit of both. So I said kind of before that I used to work in online communities, which for me, kind of starting that role was a bit weird because a lot of my day job was just moderating online communities, talking to strangers online that were interested in brands like Samsung. But I quickly learned that there's kind of a nice analogy if you think about like organizing a party, like an online community starting one is like having a party and inviting people in. And when people first come, it's like you have to do a lot of work to like warm up the room and get people to talk to each other and start building relationships and kind of encourage people to meet each other. So it requires a lot of work in the beginning, and it requires like kind of a critical mass of people to engage if only a few people are there, people are going to be like, oh, it's not a good party, we're going to leave. You need like a critical amount of people for people to see that this is a thing that they want to gather around. So I have 3 examples of communities. So Open IDEO is an example of a kind of like an open innovation community. So Open IDEO brings people together around shared challenges, and they work kind of in partnership with brands or other organizations that have a challenge that they want people to work on. And it's really about taking people through the design process. So when you kind of participate in Open IDEO, you're learning design thinking, you're learning this approach to problem solving. This is another example of a community. It's called R-Loop. And this community is all about kind of collaborative doing. So this is a self-organized community that started on Reddit. So there was SpaceX announced that they were doing a Hyperloop competition, and all these Redditors were like, this is cool, I want to make a Hyperloop. Who else wants to do it? So these people found each other on Reddit and then quickly moved to Slack and started working on this, this competition, this open call together. And these people worked together remotely on Slack for about a year before they even met in person. And I think they worked over 3 years, and last year, I think in maybe December, they had a prototype of Hyperloop that they brought to the competition. And this is the 3rd example that I have is a brand community. So this is a kind of brand partnership. So this community is called the Now Network. And it's a private online community for Pepsi, and it's run by an innovation consultancy. And this community is a group of kind of 50 creatives that are handpicked by a consultancy that runs the community. And it's all about helping Pepsi kind of get a better idea of their consumers to help them create better content. So it's really like a kind of a network that Pepsi can tap into. Like, we have a new advert, what do people think about it? We want to come up with a new soft drink, what do people think about it? And it's people from all over the world that can kind of be the voice of the consumer. So back to communities. Communities are fluid and flexible. So a community isn't like a kind of closed, kind of one-off thing. There's always people coming and going. There's lots of new faces here tonight. So these are kind of new people joining this community of practice. There's always kind of new activities and things that are happening. There might be new goals and a new purpose to a community. So things change over time, and just the community adapts. So there's kind of like an incompleteness to communities, like they're never really done, they're always shifting and changing. And within communities, there's lots of different levels of participation. So there's people that are super engaged, there's people that are passive, there's people that are kind of lurkers, kind of like on the outside looking in, not ready to participate. People can participate in groups, so they can participate alone. But people kind of decide to participate depending on what their motivations are. Like, will it meet a need that I have? Will it help me do something? Which leads to different motivators. So with the different types of communities that I referenced in those 3 examples, there's lots of different motivators for being part of that. So it could be the purpose. So with Open IDEO, I really want to get involved in working on social impact projects. It could be about identity. It could just be about having fun. It could be the intellectual challenge of working on our Hyperloop example. Or it could be money. There's some communities and competitions where you get incentives, so that could be another motivator for people. And communities have different outcomes. So as I said, those 3 kind of examples, the open innovation community, the collaborative doing one, and the brand partnership one, there's all different outcomes to those. So it could be a competition, it could be just collaboration, or it could be a learning experience. And with different communities, sometimes there's like an outcome or something tangible at the end, but sometimes there's not. I think that communities are really interesting when there's a learning experience involved. So when I was working on my thesis, I was speaking to a lot of people that either managed communities or were involved in communities. And the thing that came up a lot was these kind of learning experiences and how people were learning new skills, whether it was about a new industry or a new process or a new method. So Open IDEO, you're learning about design process. With our loop, there were students learning from experts. So there were experts from like all of the kind of Virgin Galactic and things like that that were involved in this, and then there were students, and there was this really nice kind of exchange of knowledge happening between those people. So the people that I spoke to that participated, they were participating because they wanted to learn something, because it was valuable to them, and it could help them do something in the future. So communities really thrive on diversity of expertise. So there's something called Joy's Law, which says that no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for someone else. So that's why brands are really interested in these kind of open innovation communities, bringing people from the outside in, getting new ideas. There's things like crowdsourcing platforms, where a brand will kind of have a challenge and they'll just open it up to anyone who wants to tackle that challenge. And research shows that non-domain experts can solve that faster than an expert. So it kind of really shows the value of having a really diverse group of people involved. So communities can be open or they can be closed. So by open, I mean anyone can join, like this. Anyone can come along if they're interested. So the examples I shared are Loop, that's a completely open community. Anyone who wanted to join that Slack group could. They could kind of see what channels there were, see what activities were going on, and just jump in and start doing and collaborating. But some communities are closed and they're kind of invite only. So the Pepsi kind of Now Network example is a closed community. So that is all about kind of handpicking the people that are going to be a part of that community, which means that it's a bit more stable. It's not so fluid and changing all the time. But it means you have to do a lot more work to keep those people engaged. If people drop out, you don't have the freeness of people just coming in and kind of picking up where people are leaving off. So another thing that I think is really important is to have tangible outcomes from communities. So whether it's just the experience of taking part or whether there's something that you're building out of it, it's really valuable for the people that are involved. So this is the R-Loop Hyperloop prototype, which they debuted at the competition in California. This is another example that I haven't mentioned of a community. So this is Wayfinder, and it's all about developing tech for people with visual impairments. So they had a community of experts develop an open standard that then people would be able to use to then develop apps and products. So this is kind of the outcome of that community collaboration was an open standard. So I want to share 3 things that I've learned building communities. So the first thing is build relationships, not platforms. So communities are all about the people and the interactions between them. It's not about the technology platform that they're happening on. Tech just enables that community to happen. So it's all about finding the tools that people are already using. If people are on Slack, then it was really smart that the practical service design community is on Slack. It's a really easy kind of entry point for people to access and get involved in. And I think this is really important as well, is to support relationships that are outside of kind of formal community activities. So if you see people in your community start doing things on their own, like give them support and help them do that more. If you have people that are kind of forming relationships, forming bonds, even if it isn't about the core thing of what you think your community is about, that will just make it stronger. So an example is the Now Network. So this is a private community, so they have a private Instagram page, but they saw that all of their community members were kind of following each other on Instagram and like kind of wanting to know each other a bit more. So they just created a whole Instagram page for them, invited them all, and then they let them do kind of like takeovers every so often so that they can kind of be more immersed in what everyone is doing in the cities that they're in. So it's just another kind of connection point for them. And meeting face-to-face is super important to build strong relationships, to build cooperation, to keep people engaged for a community. So the second thing I've learned is that ownership is the source of results. So having kind of agency in a community is really important. So it's all about working together and sharing responsibility, sharing learning and resources and capabilities, all to create kind of shared value for that community. So if you can give people in your community the agency to help shape the purpose and shape the direction, then it will be better off. These communities need collaboration, and collaboration needs trust. So you need to build trust by kind of giving as much as you get. So you can't just take in a community, you need to give back as well, support. So an example of doing this is upskilling participants to become kind of facilitators. So rather than depending on a facilitator to kind of guide the process, guide the direction of the community, it's really good to kind of upskill people to become facilitators and to kind of give them more power, so to say, in the community. So if you have a community manager, then you're immediately kind of adding or kind of making a power, kind of an unequal power distribution within that community. People look to a community manager for direction to kind of shape where things are going, for the right answers. So if you can take the burden off of that one person as being all-knowing, then it will have, you'll have more collaboration and you'll have kind of more a more engaged community. So this is an example from someone that I spoke to for my thesis, who was talking about crowdsourcing, open innovation, kind of online competition are really great, but at the end of the day, who's really going to do this thing? Like, we need the people that are going to shepherd ideas into actual tangible things. Without those people, then we're not going to get anywhere. So part of this is having a really strong vision about the community and making sure that everyone is on board with it and understands it, to make sure that the intentions are clear and that the vision is clear. That's important for the participants in the community, but also for the people outside of the community. So if there's people outside that could in some way affect your community, you want them to really understand what your community is for, so that they will support it. So an example of this is the Now Network, the Pepsi community. They created kind of shareable output, so they created like a magazine that then they could share with the Pepsi stakeholders, so that they could understand the community and understand the value that it was bringing, so they could get to know the community members and read the stories about how they were influencing the brand. And the third thing that I've learned is that building communities is a reflective process. So what I mean by that is communities are never done, it's iterative. You constantly have to kind of think about the decisions that you're making and think about whether they're the right things to be doing, and whether your kind of beliefs about those things are true and whether those can change. So an example of that is with the Now Network. The community manager of that told me that she believes that collaboration can't happen remotely. And I said, well, why? Why do you think that? If you can just flip that on its head and say it can happen remotely, and then figure out how to do it. So it's all about kind of being open to change and open to trying new things. And doing that by learning by doing and experimenting in that process. So you can test ideas with your community, you can prototype new things, like it's not going to be set in stone. And you can kind of frame things as learning goals, rather than kind of having metrics that you're trying to reach. So one way to do this this is another example from people that I spoke to for my thesis, and they were talking about how they had kind of learned by doing the first phase of the project. They're kind of an open innovation lab where they invite in startups, academia, experts, all these different kind of different parts, and they work on on a technology. So they're working on blockchain, and they're trying to kind of take a more service design approach and say, well, what's the user need for this thing, and how can we kind of bake that into the technology? And they discovered that they really needed to have two kind of brand sponsors when they were doing this, because if they only had one, then it was kind of like they were just kind of doing things that only pleased that one brand. And I think the last thing that I learned is about learning from communities of practice. So all about learning. They're all about creating and sharing best practice. So if you have that kind of community of practice mindset for your community, then you're going to be creating kind of, I think, mutually beneficial, that it will be mutually beneficial for everyone involved. You'll be kind of upskilling the people in your community, and then you'll also keep them engaged and motivated because you're giving back to them by helping them learn. Which leads into the community that I work on now, which is a community of practice. So what I mean by that is a community of practice has a shared domain of interest. So it could be service design like this, or the one I work on is user-centered design. And within that practice, there's shared experiences, there's shared tools, there's shared stories, there's shared kind of methods. And the third thing is that it's a community of people who build relationships with each other. So the community that I work on is the cross-government user-centered design community. So it's about 3,000 people. This is the breakdown. So lots of content designers, user researchers, and designers. And these are a couple of the things that we do to help kind of keep our community of practice. So we do meetups. So every 8 weeks, designers from across the UK government, from different departments, get together for a full day, and we share case studies, we talk about work, talk about challenges, and we invite guest speakers in as well to kind of get an outside government perspective. We have designers that are based all over the UK, so we alternate between having these in London, and then we'll have it somewhere else like Birmingham, and then London again, and they're always moving it around so that everyone can kind of get the chance to come. And in addition to design meetups, we also have kind of more focused meetups on different disciplines. So there's a user research meetup, there's an accessibility meetup, there's a service design meetup, all to help these smaller communities of practice build capability. And another thing that we do to build capability is training. So we provide training for user-centered design practitioners. User-centered design in government is very different from industry. So when a new designer joins government, regardless of their expertise, we want them to come to training. It's kind of like a onboarding to the community. It points out how we work, but it also points out the tools that we have, like mailing lists. It points out resources, and it points out kind of our ways of working. So it's quite important for kind of setting the culture and helping build culture. And as I mentioned, we have a mailing list, so this is how we kind of share learning. So people use the mailing list to ask questions, to find people that are working on similar things to them, and we also use it to kind of tell people about upcoming events that are happening. And kind of shared culture is the last point, which is really important to kind of have these kind of visual cues to help designers kind of remember their culture and they can help build culture as well in their departments. So we have kind of design principles, and we have them up on posters, and we have lots of stickers, and they're kind of highly visible. And a lot of designers in government, they might be, only a few designers working in a department. They might feel like no one's kind of listening to them or taking them seriously, but they can kind of start to build their own culture, and things like this are quite easy, small, quick wins that they can start doing. All of these are on GitHub and on Tumblr, so that people can just download them, print them, and stick them out. So to wrap up, what I'm really interested in right now is the bridge between communities of interest, so people interested in a thing, like I'm interested in user-centered design, and communities of practice, I am a designer, and how you can kind of move from the outside in. So we have lots of, where we're getting more people in government interested in design, but if they were to kind of enter the community of practice, they might disrupt the kind of the flow that's already there. It's very specific, it moves really fast. The kind of level of detail that people talk about is going to be not the right level of kind of information that someone who's just interested is looking for. So how can we help move these people into the community of practice? How can we get more designers in government without disrupting the maturity of this community of practice? Thanks.